The dropship shuddered as granite shrapnel punched through the outer hull. Ilara stepped deeper into the debris cyclone, thermos still cradled in one hand, her eyes tracking something invisible. Commander Vrax watched from the shelter entrance, his dorsal ridge locked rigid, the primal tell of a trained officer watching everything he knew become irrelevant. "The storm isn't hunting us," Ilara said, not turning. "It's just breathing. You have to step between the breaths." Vrax's mandibles clicked. 74 elite Sarnek scouts, zero chance, and the human was worried about seating ergonomics. "I wish I could tell you it ended there. It didn't. But to understand how we got here, you need to go back 3 days." The briefing chamber was cold, institutional. Vrax stood before the tactical map of Oros 4, a Class 12 Deathworld that had claimed every expedition sent to survey it. The data was clinical: gale front velocities at 140 kilometers per hour, ionized debris field, temperature drops that killed in under 2 minutes, lightning that followed no predictable pattern, or so the last 6 teams believed before they stopped sending signals. 98.6% mortality probability, Vrax announced. "Standard elite protocol. We drop, we extract the core samples from the granite deposit, we climb out." Ilara Vance sat near the back of the briefing room, slight and unbothered, a pathfinding specialist attached to the Vanguard for this specific mission. She was checking a watch, an actual mechanical watch, not a wrist computer, not a neural sync. Just a small thing with a dented steel case and a faint tick that Vrax's hearing picked up from across the room. "The ship's drop bay has been retrofitted," Vrax continued. "Thermal suits will regulate your core temp. The sensors will guide us through the debris field. Once we reach the shelter coordinates, we extract and exfil." Ilara looked up. "Who designed the seats in the bay?" "Excuse me." "The acceleration chairs. Who designed them? Because they're archaic. The lumbar support is from the expansion era. You're going to have scouts complaining about back pain while the planet tries to erase them." Vrax felt something in his chest tighten, a flutter of annoyance or something worse. "The seats are rated for high-G descent." "Rated for high-G, yes. Rated for human comfort during a mission where comfort might keep a person from panicking in the final seconds. No." She looked back at her watch. "But sure, 74 elite soldiers, 98.6% mortality. I'm sure the lumbar support is the limiting factor." The other scouts in the briefing had gone quiet. Krell, the unit's survival specialist, had almost smiled. Zen and Rix, the medic, exchanged glances. But Vrax just stared at her, this small human woman who had wandered into a Sarnak military operation and decided to critique furniture. "The thermos on your hip," he said. "Why?" Ilara touched the dented container. "Hydration improves decision-making." "And I like tea." "You're bringing tea into a lethal environment." "I'm bringing a baseline calm into a lethal environment. The tea is incidental." Vrax had no reply for that. He dismissed the briefing and spent the next 3 hours checking and rechecking the expedition loadout, trying not to think about the fact that his entire career, 40 years of tactical doctrine, sensor mastery, environmental modeling, was apparently negotiable against one human woman's watch and a thermos. The drop came 6 hours early. Oros 4 storm cycle had accelerated. The gale front hit like a physical blow. Vrax felt it through the hull first, a grinding vibration that turned into a scream as the wind exceeded 120 kilometers per hour. The outer panels went next. The scanner beside him let out a high-pitched wail, then died. Around him, the 74 scouts were vibrating at 400 hertz, their evolved biology unable to process the sheer scale of the environmental hostility. "Seal the inner bay," Vrax ordered. His ridge was beginning to flare. He could feel it, the involuntary response to stress, the tell he'd spent a lifetime learning to suppress. It was rising anyway. Krell was at the environmental controls. Pressure differential is widening, sir. We're losing thermal regulation. 11 seconds to critical. The scanner screamed again, a different pitch. Impossibility. Ilara was checking her watch. All sensors are returning static, the communications tech reported. Full spectrum. There's nothing out there but chaos. Vrax finished. We're blind. He'd trained for sensor loss. Sarnak Vanguard doctrine covered it. You fall back on secondary positioning, audio cues, the natural magnetism of Sarnak hearing. You maintain formation. You trust the training that had taken him 4 decades to perfect. Ilara stood up. The lightning isn't random. Every sensor we have says. They're wrong. Listen. She held up one hand. Around them, the storm hammered against the hull with a rhythm that Vrax's ears were parsing as pure noise. The pressure wave collapse. It sets off the discharge. The storm's not chaotic. It's just breathing on a scale. We're not evolved to understand without instruments. You want me to navigate out of here, based on your intuition about. I want you to step between the breaths. Ilara checked her watch again. Right now, we have exactly 12 seconds before the next pressure collapse. When it hits, the lightning will arc along the debris field, here, here, and here. She pointed to 3 locations on the map he could no longer trust. That gives us a corridor, 180 meters. We move through it before the reload pulse hits. Vrax felt his ridge lock rigid. Every part of his training was screaming that this was insanity. Every part of him that had kept himself and thousands of other Sarnak alive through hostile extractions was saying no. Do not follow this human woman into an invisible gap. Do not stake the survival of this unit on the idea that a Deathworld had a rhythm, and a soft species could hear it. How sure are you? He asked. Completely, Ilara said. I've been timing it since we dropped. Every cycle is exactly 48 seconds. Pressure builds, discharge, reload. 48 seconds. Vrax ordered the evacuation. Krell first, then Zen, then Rix and the rest. Ilara walked between them as they moved toward the shelter entrance, herding them like a predator moving prey toward an exit. She wasn't fast, wasn't aggressive, just present, aware. The moment came, the moment Vrax felt the pressure wave collapse. Somewhere outside, the storm's breath caught. The lightning arced. The debris field opened. Now, Ilara said. They moved. Vrax was on the edge of the formation, close enough to watch her. The stone and steel shrapnel whipped past at lethal velocity, millimeters from bare skin, yet she didn't flinch. Didn't accelerate. Didn't do anything but keep walking, her eyes tracking something only her nervous system could perceive. The rhythm, the breathing space between the breaths. 12 seconds off, she muttered to the wind. Vrax's mandibles clicked. It was the sound an officer makes when the world rewrites itself. Not in the way the philosophers or the historians described it, not as a concept. In the actual mechanical failure of the framework he'd built his entire existence upon. 40 years of training, obsolete in the time it took to cross an invisible gap. They emerged into the granite shelter and the door sealed. The sound of the storm became distant, not distant enough, but enough. Vrax's equipment was going dark one piece at a time. Thermal gauge, dead. Magnetic compass, spinning wild. Life support on battery. Ilara was checking her watch. It's over, Vrax said. It wasn't a question. The immediate threat is. She sat on one of the acceleration benches, the one Vrax had brought without considering her critique. She was right about the lumbar support. He could see it now. But we'll need to wait for the next reload cycle. 6 hours. The shelter's positioned in a pressure shadow. We're safe here. Krell came to stand near Vrax. The survival specialist was staring at Ilara, the way Vrax imagined soldiers stared at relics from ancient wars, with a mixture of awe and the unsettling recognition that they had just seen something the training manuals didn't account for. She read it, Krell said quietly. The entire planetary system, not with instruments, with, what, instinct? Fear is just a lack of data, Alara said. It was the most she'd said about herself in any briefing. Once you have the data, the fear goes away. Once you understand the pattern, the chaos is just rhythm you haven't learned yet. Vrax went to submit the formal report 6 hours later, back on the Vanguard's command deck. He wrote the extraction stats. 74 scouts deployed, 74 scouts extracted, core samples secured. No casualties, no sensor failures, no tactical deviations from protocol. Then he added the reclassification notice. It took 3 hours to write the right words. In the end, he settled on what his instruments had failed to tell him. Humanity was not a species that survived Deathworlds. Humanity was something else, something that read them, something that understood the fine print of hostile environments the way other species understood language, something that didn't need fear because fear required the absence of understanding, and humans, at least this one, understood so completely that fear became irrelevant. The thermos sat on his desk now. Alara had left it in the briefing room, along with a note, for the next mission. It was dented, scarred, cold in his hands, empty, a monument to a baseline comm that made obsolescence look like the only logical outcome. Vrax's gaze settled on the submit button for the reclassification order. He pressed it. Some species survive Deathworlds. Humans simply read the fine print.